Let me ask you the question again, Mr. Jones. Make sure you understand it very clearly. You and your company want the world to believe.
Listen to the question. He's going to ask it again. Hold on.
Let me ask you the question again, Mr. Jones. Make sure you understand it very clearly.
Make sure you understand the question.
You and your company.
You and your company.
Want the world to believe that this judge is rigging this court proceeding so that a script, and I mean a literal script, is being followed. That's what you want the world to believe. That's what InfoWars wants.
I believe when you're given a court order that you cannot say you're innocent, that's not America, and the court order's right there on the table. I've been told I can't say I'm innocent.
So you need to answer the question.
And now she's telling him what to say again. It's not a script, by the way, but she's telling him what he needs to say or cannot say in response to the question.
That is asked.
I asked you this question. Yes or no, that's what you want the world to believe.
No, I believe the jury's real, and I believe that I'm innocent until proven guilty, and I believe a jury should decide my guilt.
Except factually, a jury actually has not found his guilt, but the judge has, by default, setting that
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to offer a clip from InfoWars on Friday for the purposes of impeachment in which those exact words were said.
By the way, those exact words were said. By whom? The question was you and InfoWars, not you or InfoWars, and then setting aside whether or not this witness speaks for InfoWars.
Right.
That's why the judge is rigging the court proceeding to make sure that the script, this is literally a script. A script gets told in a certain way for future audiences.
That will definitely be allowed for impeachment.
Well, that will definitely be allowed for impeachment, but I'm going to tell Alex Jones what he cannot say in response.
Would you?
It's free speech systems.
Okay, you're right. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. I heard him say you were on your show saying these things, but
Yeah, and he's not wrong.
we can go back, but he said your company.
No, he said you and your company,
fair enough.
not you or your company, and that presumes that Barnes speaks for the company. Words are important, people. Now, with that said, there's so much going on with this trial, but it's not the subject matter for tonight's sidebar. Tonight's sidebar, it's going to be talking about something that I know very little about. Betting. I mean, well, I know a little bit about online gambling. I know how to lose money doing it. But we've got Kelly in Vegas who works with Barstool Sports. And we've got Robert Barnes. And it's been a big day. It's been a fun day. Robert and I are definitely going to talk about the other stuff later. But tonight, let's take a pause from the Alex Jones trial. Let's take a pause from all things political, although I suspect somehow politics is going to come into this because I suspect this is going to dabble into political betting as well. Kelly in Vegas, Robert Barnes in the house. Oh, standard intro disclaimers. You know the rules, people. No medical advice, no election fortification advice, no legal advice. YouTube has these things called super chats right on time. Chet Chisholm. They are showing an advert. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Yeah. And by the way, that does not have to do with one's search browser. That is on InfoWars. That's a, placement, product placement, and good product placement. YouTube takes 30% of all super chats. We are simultaneously streaming on Rumble. They have Rumble Rants. Rumble takes 20%. Yada, yada. You know the shtick. If I don't get your super chat and you're going to feel grifted, don't give it. It's for support. It's not necessarily, I'm going to bring it up and highlight and talk about the question. So if you're going to feel bad, if I don't bring up your question like so, don't do it. I don't like people feeling bad. Now, without further ado, do I put on slow mode? I'm not going to put on slow mode yet. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to bring in Barnes first, Kelly in Vegas second, and I'm going to structure this so that if I bring up a chat, it will cover only my mug and not the other two. Kelly, Robert, how goes your respective battles?
Good.
Kelly, okay, you may have to tell the world of our audience who may not know who you are, 30,000-foot overview. Then I'm going to delve into your childhood deepest memories to explain who you are, why you do what you do. Then we're going to get into what you do and the coolness of it. 30,000-foot overview for those who don't know. Who are you?
My name's Kelly Stewart. Listen, I'm the probably most well-known female sports bettor in the world. It's been a really fun ride over the last decade. who doesn't love getting to do what they love for a living? I've been very blessed, worked for several major companies, and I landed last summer at Barstool, and I've honestly never been happier. You know, you mentioned right before we came on, you said, is there anything off topic? I said, absolutely not. I work at Barstool. I get to work at Barstool Sports and get to be myself. It's nothing else you could ever ask for.
Yeah, for those out there, to sort of give a opening statement of kinds, for those that may be unfamiliar, sort of Kelly's story is kind of an American dream story. It's also specific about sports. It goes from Kansas to Vegas to Florida, covers sports betting from Barstool Sports to Wager Talk TV. Last year, that if you were taking some of her bets and parlay bets, you would have made enough money to be a gambler for the next couple of decades without being able to lose money. That's how successful her picks were. So we're going to be talking about the greatest sport in the history of America, known as college football. And for those wondering, this is, even though I'm in Texas, this is Tennessee orange, not Texas orange, not to be confused.
Good. I'm glad you clarified that, because this is a horns down kind of show. Just got to throw that out there. I know it triggers some people, but any chance I get to disrespect the University of Texas, I'm going to take it.
Absolutely.
I told Kelly and I texted Barnes before this, I'm going to be out of my league this entire sidebar. I know nothing of American university sports. I know very little of American and even Canadian sports for that matter. But Kelly, Barnes said it starts in Tennessee, goes to Florida, and then to Vegas, or from Vegas to Florida?
So I grew up in Kansas, actually, and I really didn't ever have big aspirations in journalism. That's just the facts. I've never been a big public speaker. My degree was in business. I graduated college during the recession. I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get a job. I had some friends that were working at a nightclub in Vegas. They said, come on out to Vegas. And I kind of parlayed. I love it. Yay, EMA. That actually stands for Every Man a Wildcat. And no, they haven't changed it yet. Thank goodness. Cancel culture has not come for Kansas State's saying just yet, but I'm sure it's on the horizon. That being said, it's been a really fun run. I moved out to Vegas, worked at a nightclub, and really, to play on words, parlayed it into a career in sports gambling. I've always loved sports. Loved sports. Kansas State University was my first love, and they've broken my heart on too many occasions. No national championships outside of really bass fishing or equestrian, but they kind of solidified my love for the game of football, particularly college football. And it started from there. I moved out to Vegas. I started hanging around some people in the sports book, because that's where you go to watch all the games. If you've ever seen a sports book in Las Vegas, there's about 40 TVs and your head is constantly on a swivel. It's a great place to watch games. And I've just been loving Vegas ever since. Vegas and I had really a roller coaster ride, and I'd been kind of looking to make an exit, or at least a partial exit, for a while. I looked into Costa Rica. I talked to a couple companies down there, and then we got PAPSPA repealed. And so then the United States got legalized sports gambling outside of Nevada. And I started looking, okay, where else would I like to live? Where's another state without state tax? And really, COVID just gave me that little bit of nudge to say, you know what, go buy a second house in Florida. And I've really enjoyed living here. The people in the South, and I had to think about that for a minute, because Florida really is the South. Didn't know. I didn't think about it, because I've been to Miami, I've been to Orlando. But overall, the people down here are so nice. It's been kind of a nice change of pace for myself to kind of go back and forth from Vegas. Right now, my boyfriend and business partners out there running our proxy service, which is a whole nother sidebar, but that's how I met Mr. Barnes. And he came on the Kelly and Murray podcast during the 2020 election and shared a ton of value. And I get a lot of jokes because I had Florida plus 175 for Trump. And it was the easiest bet. And then it kind of went downhill from me from there. But that saved most of my election betting disaster. But Robert came on, and we've been friends ever since. He's been great. And so when he asked me to come on the show, I said, absolutely.
Yeah, I have some heartbreaking memories concerning Kansas State, but it was when Kansas State crushed Tennessee in 1999. That was very
Peyton
unfortunate.
Manning.
Yeah, for the Big Orange. But when did your affection, love of college football begin? What's some of your earliest memories? Like, I remember as a kid, my dad was a big Michigan fan. We're going to have Steve Deason in a week or two. He because he moved to Michigan when he was in the 1960s, so Bo Schembechler, the whole combination. So that was my intro before Tennessee football was actually Michigan football from the time I was little, just watching my dad cheer it. And he was a huge New England Patriots fan back when they were terrible. And so had some of the hated the Chicago Bears for like 20 years because they beat my dad's Patriots in the Super Bowl. But what was some of your earliest memories about college football or sports in general, and where did your affection begin?
It's hard to say where it began, but both of my parents were not big sports fans. I mean, my dad was a Steelers fan. He grew up in Kansas City before the Chiefs were there, so he kind of cheered for the blue-collar team. My mom, I found out later, went to KU, and that was pretty heartbreaking for me. I think that was like a deep, dark family secret that everybody didn't want to tell, little 6-year-old Kelly, because they knew she was going to have a meltdown, and that's exactly what happened. But my love for sports came from my Aunt Helen. It's been pretty funny to say that because so many people are, oh, you must have had a dad or an uncle or a brother, and that just wasn't the case. Aunt Helen didn't have any kids, and she would take me to the games. And now I'm trying to pay it forward and take her back to some of the games, but I'll probably never be able to repay her because, frankly, like, here's me at 8 years old, moved to Manhattan, Kansas with my mom, and every weekend we were at a K-State football game or basketball game. Even when you're in those small college towns, when you're a kid, sometimes they let you in for free. So we even went to Kansas State women's volleyball games, baseball games. It was a really fun place to grow up. And I think that that's where my love of sports really started, because when you're in a small area like that, there's lots of outdoor stuff to do that's not during the winter, right? Go fishing, go hiking, go do those kind of things. But that entire area revolves around Kansas State sports, particularly college football. If you've ever been to Manhattan, Kansas, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is, while it has grown a lot since I lived there, it's still a strip of bars called Aggieville, the stadium, and that is what you do. I mean, there's some nice restaurants. Finally, we're getting some hotels so people, have places to stay instead of in their RV in the parking lots. But it has been really interesting to see what would Manhattan be if Bill Snyder never went to Kansas State. There's been articles written about the millions of dollars that Kansas State football brings in every single weekend to the community. It's absolutely incredible. But that was where I would say my love really started brewing. And then on the flip side, the gambling side of things, it's funny to hear my mom tell stories about my dad. See, he doesn't really talk about it very much, but she's like, oh yeah, your dad would go, before you were born, your dad would go to the bar with $50 in his pocket and come home with $500. And I never understood how that happened. Well, playing cards, rolling dice, bar bets, those kind of fun things. And so I think I kind of have that gambler side, maybe while he didn't teach me a lot about sports betting, but that actual gambler side of things from him, almost like hereditary.
I got to ask this, like, what did you study in university to go on into doing what you're doing? And then specifically, other than gambling, what do you do with Barstool Sports?
So it's interesting. I actually have a business degree, particularly in marketing. Sales was always kind of something that interested me. I was always in the food and beverage industry, but before I was 18. And then when you're 18 in Kansas, you can serve beer. It's kind of this weird law as far as a waitress and stuff goes. And I kind of realized that I was able to talk to people. I was able to walk up to that table full of strangers and not be intimidated. And so marketing was just a natural progression for me. I remember my first year, they said, hey, pick a major. And I said, all right, I'll do business. And then the second year they said, okay, pick an actual, out of, management, finance, accounting. And I'm like, oof, accounting, management, no thanks. And marketing was just an easy segue for me. And that's kind of what Barstool Sports is. I mean, they're the king of content for almost every social media platform on the planet. That's what they do. They crank out content. And obviously there's a big side of marketing yourself that goes into that. And so it's interesting how I have also used what I learned in college to do that. Because all of my girlfriends and most of the guys I've worked with in the media space, they all have journalism backgrounds. And of course, that's why they're so much more polished and well-spoken. And they write these amazing monologues that I could just never do. It's mind-boggling to me, but they're so talented. And on the flip side, I did take a couple of finance classes and I was like, finance, it's whatever. And my high school math teacher will tweet me from occasion all the time. He's like, remember how much you hated math? And it is funny now that I use math on a very regular basis. I love it because it now is useful to me in my adult life. But it was something that I really, really struggled with when I was a kid.
Yeah, what was growing up in Kansas like? Because I assume it wasn't necessarily drag queen story time kind of educate. It might have been a little bit different. What was it Kansas like when you were there?
Kansas has always been a unique place, right? I think that I've had to explain this to people as far as Kansas history goes, right? So when you're in 5th grade in the state of Kansas, your entire social studies program that year is about the state of Kansas. And you get a lot of like kind of comments from people, maybe they've never been to Kansas or they didn't read the history or they didn't really pay attention in history class when it came to the Civil War. But Kansas has always been kind of progressive, right? Kansas fought very hard to be a free state in the late 1800s. And if you kind of read up into the history, they've kind of always been a little different politically. I think the thing with Kansas is kind of the thing we see with a lot of the states. You have Wichita, you have Kansas City, you have Topeka, you have Lawrence, and even Manhattan kind of dictates the politics of the entire state. But I think Kansas was a great place to really grow up. And I don't remember any political talk in school. I kind of remember the 2000 election and learning about the hanging chads and talking about, but no teachers ever pushed a political ideology on me to any of like my actual memory. Because I just mentioned Mr. Hoyt, who was my favorite teacher of all time. He and I disagree all the time on Twitter about politics, but never once as a child did he bring up any of it. Never once did he formulate an opinion in front of us or even give one. And so I think it's really interesting how we're seeing Kansas kind of shift a little bit. And I'm okay with part of the shift. I'm okay with the legalization of marijuana. I'm okay with they passed the sports betting bill, which I thought would never happen. The problem is that we have polarizing parties, right? You have the stronghold Republicans that have to stay super conservative, and then you have the progressives on the other side. And there's just no common ground I'm noticing in Kansas. And I think something's going to come to a boiling point there.
Kelly, it says on the interwebs that you're the best and arguably only handicapper. What the hell is a handicapper? I know what handicapper means in certain contexts, but not in sports betting. What is it, and what does it mean?
It's funny. Yeah, there's a handful of other women handicappers: Ariel Epstein, Claudia Bellafato, Megan Making Money, that I do a show with on Barstool called Money Shots. We have a great time. There are other ladies. Pam Maldonado is over at Yahoo. There are other women out there, and they are coming for my job really, really fast. And it's really exciting because that kind of gives me that push to be just a little bit better. But what is a handicapper? This is funny. Let's call it 2010, 2011. I remember my mom calling me and she goes, "What is this handicapper thing that people keep asking me about?" And it was actually kind of not funny, but kind of funny. There was a lot of articles written when I was fired from ESPN. And one of the articles was handicapped woman fired from ESPN. And that's kind of where the word gets misconstrued a lot. And that's what happened with my mom. People are like, "Wait, what happened? Was she in an accident?" And she's like, no, it's like a sports betting thing. And they're like, "What?" So a handicapper really, by definition, at least my definition, is somebody who looks at the game of, let's use football, for example. I can look at it from an X's and O's perspective. I can say this defensive scheme is going to match up really well against this quarterback. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to figure out where the sports books are wrong in terms of their betting lines. So let's use the CFL, for example. You've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders versus the Toronto Argonauts, right? Toronto is a 3.5-point favorite in the CFL, right? That means they have to win the game by 4 or more. My job is to figure out where the money is going, to figure out where I think the sports books are either wrong or right, and whether or not I want to place a wager on that game because I disagree with the said line. So let's say that I break it down from an analytical perspective, right? I've got lots of what I like to call nerd sheets because, again, math is not my strong point, but when you plug and play in Excel or any other Google Sheets, whatever, it kind of does the work for you. And that's what's been so great about being at Wager Talk. I am surrounded by guys that have been doing this for 40 years, and they're absolutely amazing. Anytime I've ever had a question over the last 5 years, they're quick to answer. We have databases that you can look up trends and angles, things like that. So the long story short here is a handicapper is somebody who is analytically looking at a sport, whether it's horse racing, baseball, college football. I mean, anything. You can literally handicap anything. And that's where Barnes came in on the Kelly and Murray show a couple years ago, and we handicapped the 2020 election, because you can even look at odds for any given event and say something's wrong here, and here's the data to prove it, and here's the math to prove it.
Now, in terms, when do you remember your first interest in sports betting itself as separate from sports? Like when I was a kid, I started betting my fellow classmates for pizza money when I was in 6th grade on March Madness. I actually bet against Bobby Knight and John Thompson, made money back then. This was the late 80s. And that's when I sort of got interested in it. Then in law school, sort of picked it up a little bit more. Helmuth was, down the road in Madison doing his poker before he went big into Vegas. And then just found it a sort of a fun occupation, a way to try to figure things out, learn things, understand the sport a lot better. When you have skin in the game, you learn the game a lot better than if you don't. But where did you first pick up your interest in the sports betting side of the sports equation?
I knew that sports gambling existed. I didn't understand how they arrived at the side, whether it's, as I mentioned, Toronto -3.5 or the total 46.5. I knew what they meant, but I didn't understand the math behind the lines. And probably would be when I fully grasped it was after I moved to Vegas. I do remember my first bet was the first time I was ever in Vegas. My older sister was the only one that was able to come with me because none of my friends were 21 yet. I won a trip to Vegas, and I went out and I put $100 from my dad on K-State to win the national championship. I'm trying to think if that was 2003. But I wouldn't have been 21 yet. So it must have not been a very good K-State team. And it probably was not even remotely close to winning. But that was my first sports bet. And then moving to Vegas in the late 2000s was when I started asking questions. I had several guy friends that were like, oh, here's your answer for this. And that was kind of before you could really Google things. Of course, there were search engines you could watch, but there were no videos like we put out at Wager Talk today. Like now there are just, you could type in what is the spread and there's going to be 100 videos that pop up. And that's what's really exciting about the wave of the future. And I think that's why we've seen so many people now come out of the woodwork to bet on sports, that and the fact that it's legal in, 30 plus states.
Sorry, actually, when did it become legal? Because I do remember in my lifetime it wasn't legal, but I only remember that because as of a certain point in time, poker, online gambling, sports betting was that all at the same time, Robert or Kelly? Who remembers?
Yeah, 2018. I remember I was in Mexico. I got a call from my agent. He goes, hey, do you want to interview at ESPN? And I said, yeah, when? He goes, tomorrow. I go, I'm in Mexico. Like, what? So I said, push it off a couple days. And I remember standing in the office and all of us are just watching the TV as the ticker goes by and says, hey, this is happening. And it was a really awesome, very historic day, at least in my world. Yes. See, Trenton knows. He grew up spoiled. If you grew up in Nevada, it was like, well, of course.
Well, okay. I'm going to ask you this question. Now, I know the answer in advance, more so with sports betting as opposed to, say, investments. With people who manage other people's money, my question is always, if you can do it so well for others, why don't you just do it for yourself and not, and keep the secrets, keep all the profits? Sports betting, I presume, you can make it for yourself, but then you can also make it exponentially through content, through engagement, through sponsorships, whatever. Do you bet your own money on the recommendations that you make to others?
I will not put out a recommendation that I do not have my own money on, and that has always been my rule. I'll give you an opinion. Sure, you want to know about the Sunday night football game? Hey, I've got no skin in the game, but sure, Eagles plus 3.5 at home look great for this reason. Not playing it myself. And so I've always been under that mantra. I think it's very important. If you are in this world, whether it's content, whether you're selling picks, whether it's anything, there's a lot of really shitty people. And pardon my French, but there really is. And they're looking out there to scam people, and they're looking out there to be deceitful. And I try to be as far away from that as humanly possible, because it does kind of give the industry a black eye. And I really wish that it didn't happen, but you could go on Instagram, you could go on Twitter, and in 30 seconds, you could find some guy telling you to send him $50 for his sports picks. And that's an unfortunate thing, but those guys are never going to go away. So all I can do is what's in my control, and that is give out the best information I possibly can. share everything that I can, but after, of course, I make my own bets. But, you're kind of right. I always joked with that about stock investments too. Like, if you're so good, just do it yourself. Well, I do it myself. But luckily for me, being an attractive woman, and that's just the honest to God truth, other people want to pay me more money on top of it. And like Robert said, last year was a really good season. The first year of COVID, fall 2020 was terrible. I got crushed in college football, and I realized the lack of home field advantage with no fans really, really hurt those underdogs. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those underdogs each and every week that have a shot to win outright. Because as I mentioned, that 3.5 point spread, for example, that means if Saskatchewan beats Toronto outright, they're probably plus 150. So now I'm betting $100 to win 150 versus $110 to win 100. And that's where, once you start getting those juices flowing, I think it's very, very addictive in terms of, no, I want to find dogs that can win this game outright. Plus, it's more exciting that way.
Now, how much of a culture shock was going from Manhattan, Kansas to Las Vegas, Nevada? And how much while you were there did you see, as I've seen, Vegas change?
Oh, Vegas has changed so much. I mean, I was there for 14 years, and I'll be honest with you. I moved to Las Vegas. I lived with my girlfriend, Lindsay. We had a little cute house in Southern Highlands. I think our rent was $1,100 a month for a house with a pool. And we did really well. We worked at a nightclub. But yes, things got very real for me very quickly. Growing up in Kansas, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, particularly now, but I'd never seen cocaine before. The very first night we get off work, what do? When anybody else gets off work, they want to go have drinks. They want to go have dinner. Even though my shift ended at 2:30 or 3 a.m., we would go find a place because that's Vegas. It's a 24-hour town. And I remember being like, is this happening at like, who is this person? And it's like very culture shock like that for me. I knew that there were strip clubs and things like that, but like to just have somebody just blatantly like right there in front of you, you're like, is that what I think? In Kansas, you get caught with anything, you're going to jail. So I was like, I'm going to see my way out of here. So those kind of things happened a lot. But working in the bars in college, I think kind of prepared me enough for at least that side of Vegas. But yeah, I mean, Vegas has just exploded. And for better, for worse, I think we could argue both sides. I do have a very large spot in my heart for Vegas. I love being there during March Madness. I love being there during football season. But I've started to realize what's more important to me. And as I mentioned, COVID kind of gave me that nudge. Both my parents are getting older, and I wanted to spend more time with them. I've got a sister with kids that live in Florida. I've got, a boyfriend whose entire family lives down here now. So it's kind of been one of those things where you work really hard and you want to achieve things in life, but it's not as important until you figure out who you want to spend that with. And it's been a really fun year back and forth from Vegas and Florida to be able to see these people so much more. I will say, however, I never realized seeing my parents 2 or 3 times a year, now seeing them 2 or 3 times a week, how much I'm like them. I am like, no, I am not my mother. I am not my father. Yeah, unfortunately I am.
Kelly, you mentioned it. I had the question in my head. I imagine some of this stuff, some of getting the information, getting the lesser known information, if you know people who say, okay, the quarterback is sick this week, is that stuff you can factor into it? And since you mentioned it, yes, I presume it might be easier for an attractive individual, female or male, charismatic, nice, likable, to get that sort of insider information. How much of that actually plays into what you do? And just also, everybody out there, I don't gamble. I don't like gambling. I don't like losing money. So I don't want anyone thinking this is an endorsement of anything. I find it interesting.
Roulette. Except for roulette, Viva.
Robert, when I was down,
roulette.
I was down 25
in the casino.
Yeah, but
I was down $25.
Always bet on black, never lost money. Viva was out in Vegas, took him down, Fremont Street. I kept trying to get him to take photos with some of the interesting performers out there, but he stayed away wisely. But told him to bet on black, made money once again. Never lost money betting on black on roulette.
That was my favorite.
I was down $25. I already felt sick. But setting all that aside, in doing what you do, how much does involve potentially getting insider scoops, insider information, and is that even legal? Like if you know the quarterback's not feeling well or someone's injured and you get that scoop, is that something you're allowed to factor into your assessments?
I'll be honest with you. A lot of the times I don't share it. I will say I like this side, and knowing deep dark in the depths of my soul what the truth is, I don't ever want to get anybody in trouble. I actually had, and I couldn't confirm this, but I actually had been told a few years ago, prior to Chris Kleiman coming to K-State, that there was a picture of me in the K-State locker room that was like, do not follow this woman on Twitter. Do not tell this woman anything. And that was because I was flirting with some of the guys on the team and be like, hey, so, you're just a long snapper. How's Colin Klein's back today? Like, I just was like, playing the game to try to see who was healthy and who wasn't. There is a really funny story, though, about one of the times that it really helped me out. And I remember I was back in Manhattan for the K-State Auburn game. So this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And we were pretty intoxicated. It was one of those day games. So you started drinking early. We lost. Don't remind me, but they did cover the spread. So I tried to keep it together. I was upset that I didn't catch that plus 250, but I was sitting on the steps of Jimmy John's. And if you know where that is in Manhattan, Kansas, it's right in the middle of Aggieville on the Strip. And I'm just like, can we go home now? Like, I'm tired. I'm over it. I'm in a bad mood. And this drunk girl sits down next to me and she's rambling. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like, I'll hear you. It's like kind of like when you hear about women going to the bathroom. They're like, you're so pretty. Like, I'm not usually like that, but I was listening to her. And then I heard her say her boyfriend's name. And I go, wait, the basketball player? And she goes, yeah. Sure enough, we exchanged numbers. And during football season, when K-State was playing at KU, K-State was a 13.5-point underdog. He was announced out. I texted her. I said, is he really not playing? And she goes, no, he's on the bus. He's going. Bet K-State plus 13.5. Game closes 9.5. Of course, K-State loses by 11. I got to cash my ticket. I was very happy about those kind of things. And those are the kind of things that, yes, I'm sure would get somebody in big, big trouble. The good news, he's not in the NBA. I haven't talked to her since. I couldn't even tell you her name. But those kind of things are interesting. I remember one time my best friend she went to Central Michigan, and I gave out Central Michigan in my 3-team money line parlay. They were a 6.5-point underdog, and I do not recall who they were playing. Sure enough, she's out at the bars, and she texts me, hey, I just saw this guy getting arrested. I think he's a really important player. Sure enough, star running back. And I did try to do my best and tell people, like, hey, this guy's out, like, abort mission. We got to find a new team in the parlay or bet the other side. Sure enough, like 2 hours later, information comes out. He's out. Line goes crazy. They get blown out. It didn't matter. But it was one of those scenarios where it was kind of like, okay, you just happened to be at the right place at the right time and had the wherewithal, sober enough to text me, hey, I heard this guy's important. Does that affect you for tomorrow? And I'm like, thank you. I needed that. So those kind of those kind of small things happen very, very, oh, how cute. Good afternoon.
We're talking, just so everybody knows, he can't hear the gambling talk. I've got the headphones on. Just
okay, good.
Go and push this kid back up.
We wouldn't want to scar any children. I have a potty mouth. I cuss like a sailor, so I'm glad he cannot hear anything that I say. I really am truly one of the guys, if you will, and I think that's been what's been really helpful for me in my career. I can take a lot of heat. I can give a lot of heat, and it makes it a lot more entertaining.
Yeah, there's
Robert
for people
Kelly.
out there, there's no legal prohibition on so-called insider information in the sports betting world. Now, if you're a player and you're throwing games, that can be a different dynamic. But speaking of sports more generally, what were some of your early favorite memories in sports? Like, I remember growing up, and it was mostly Boston Celtics memories because my dad was from Rhode Island, mom was from New Hampshire. So everything was New England, Boston Red Sox, Boston Celtics, New England Patriots. And back then, the Patriots were terrible. That was a bitter memory of that Super Bowl. My dad thought they were going to win because they're up 3-0, went to church, came back to 45-3. They're letting the fat guy run a couple of touchdowns in. It was not good. But the Celtics were great. That was Larry Bird, 81, 84, 86. The Celtics Lakers, great time. My dad was still complaining about the Red Sox trading Carlton Fisk. So the Celtics were the heroic stories of my youth. What were some of your favorite early sports memories?
So I grew up in the 90s, and every kid was either a Bulls fan or a Cowboys fan. And my sister married a guy from Denver. And as I mentioned, my dad wasn't a Chiefs fan. So even though the Chiefs were close proximity, they weren't very good, even though they did have Joe Montana for a short period of time. And so he took me to a Broncos game, and then they won back-to-back Super Bowls. And there I was, stuck as a Broncos fan. It's been okay a little bit. Peyton helped save a little bit there. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little cynical. I feel like as a gambler, you always remember your bad losses, right? You always remember that time that you're like, why did that happen? And so my worst memory is the Big 12 championship game. We lost to Texas A&M. Speaking of being up late, and I think it was USC had lost that night.
Well, yeah, UCLA lost to Miami because that's what led Tennessee to the national title game that year to get to play Florida State. Was back-to-back losses, UCLA, and tough loss. And I think they lost to the former Tennessee backup quarterback, Brandon Stewart, who was at Texas A&M at the time.
Yeah, and then so I threw a massive fit. I was furious. It was my birthday. I said I was never going to be a K-State fan again. I have lots of memories of that. And my aunt made me, as punishment, go to the Alamo Bowl where Drew Brees, and this would have been a great betting opportunity, right? That letdown spot. K-State did not care about the Alamo Bowl. They were supposed to be in the national championship. Had I been a sports bettor at 13, 14 years old, I would have definitely bet Purdue because Drew Brees looked like the Super Bowl caliber winning quarterback that he now is. That being said, man, what a letdown spot. And hearing some of those players, they were significantly older than me then, but hearing some of the stories, I did Ben Lieber's podcast. He played for the Vikings for a little bit now doing media in Minneapolis. He was like, oh yeah, we didn't care about that game. And I'm like, I'm glad I got dragged to it. But those are the type of memories I have. Colin Klein, K-State losing to Baylor in 2013 when I had a K-State at 45-1 ticket to win the national championship. Those were my early days when I still bet with my heart and I still cared a lot. And that's the unfortunate part is sports gambling's kind of ruined me, if you will, as far as a fan perspective. My fandom is very closely aligned with my bank account now. And sure, I want to go and enjoy games, but I'm not going to go unless I've got some action on them. Like that's just the degenerate almost side of me, if you will.
Your preferred sport is college football. Do you dabble in the UFC realm as well?
I love the UFC. Shout out to Dana White, what he did in the summer of 2020, keeping all of us sane. And that's really what I think he did very well by saying, you know what, we're not going to have any fans, but we're going to test these two fighters and we're going to put them in a cage and you guys are going to be entertained for 3 rounds. And that was really nice because it was basically UFC and then golf kind of started and then baseball kind of started. But it was one of those things where it was the UFC. It was in Vegas. If I got free tickets, sure, let's go and have a good time. But I didn't really understand the sport itself. I thought it was a little gruesome. I don't really like blood and guts. But there was something that kind of just happened over that summer where I'm like, this is awesome. Like literally awesome. I love that we have something to unify us other than the Tiger King. And like I said, shout out to Dana White. So I do love UFC. I do watch it now every single time that there is an event. I was actually in Jacksonville in April of 21 when I was with Bleacher Report. They sent us to the first UFC fight where there was fans allowed to be back, and it was absolutely electric. So yeah, if you haven't been to a UFC fight, I highly recommend it. My biggest beef with the UFC is there's not enough underdogs that went outright. That is the only problem. And you'll see some here and there. Every once in a while, you'll get that Ronda Rousey type knockout where nobody was expecting it. Conor McGregor, those big names do lose. And those are exciting for me because I guess I'm just the underdog queen. I love seeing those underdogs somehow basically literally defy the odds.
This goes back. I didn't bet at all at the time, but I remember it. Seth Petrozelli knocking out Kimbo Slice was like every time I huge. I didn't bet on any of these things, and I sort of stopped watching UFC when Anderson Silva snapped his leg in half on Chris Weidman. That was not because it turned me off.
That's what I'm talking about. I can't. I have to look away. And
I talked people into watching the UFC. I said it's not that bad. 9 out of 10 times they get knocked out. The snap heard around the world, and these people were like, oh my God. And when they replayed it and you saw his ankle touch his knee. Sorry, so I just had to throw that in there. Robert, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to ask you what some of your favorite bets are. Because for me, my favorite all-time bet is still the 2016 presidential election for a bunch of reasons, not just the amount of money involved.
You made millions of dollars off of it, Barnes. Of course it was your favorite.
Well, and it was the getting to see the bitterness of the people who lost the money, including some folks at William Hill because of a little payback from some years in Vegas. where they have banned many of us for winning.
I was actually told I might be allowed to bet there again. I should probably look into that. I got booted, let's see, March Madness of 16, I believe, was the last time I was allowed to wager there.
Like the head guy even sat down with me. He did predict that what was going to happen because I think it was 14, 15, and they were buying up all the technology. And he said, by the way, it's going to be legal across the country in about 5 to 6 years in half the country. And I was surprised he said that. It turned out to be right. That was because I churned like $2 million in a month betting on college basketball, but it was a small amount, just churned over a lot is what was happening. But once I made some money, I was out the door.
Take about 6 zeros off that, Barnes, and that's what I got booted for.
I know it's amazing. If you win, you're gone at William Hill. Sad, pitiful thing. But my favorite bet all time was sports bet 2001 Tennessee 18-point underdogs to Florida in the Swamp. I always like to remind Florida fans, Spurrier's last game at home was when he got whooped as an 18-point favorite, which he had a habit of doing, by the way, at the Swamp. I think he managed to lose 4 times as a 14-point favorite or bigger. But the fact that it was Tennessee, the fact that it was Fulmer, the fact that the SEC title was on the line, all of that, and then the money, that was the easiest cash I ever made. That 18 points was nowhere near it. But what was your favorite, if you have any, all-time sports bets?
So I think my favorite bet is probably the last one I won. And that's just full disclosure. Of course, the next one that's going to get me paid is my favorite at that moment in time. And that sounds a little greedy, but that's just the facts. I always remember the bad beats, but I would have to say my all-time bet was the parlay that really catapulted me into the space. In 2013, I hit a 3-team underdog parlay, $100 paid $8,500. And the reason why that's still my favorite, even though I hit one very, very close to that this year and actually back-to-back weeks, just not as significantly priced, it really did change my life. And so I think it has to be my favorite. Marco D'Angelo, one of the guys from Wager Talk that I'm really close with, asked me one time and said, what do you think the residual from that parlay was? Sure, you won $8,500 off a $100 bet that night, but what is the residual? I'm like, I have no idea. It literally changed my entire existence and catapulted me into where I'm at today.
Can you explain for people that don't know what a parlay bet is?
So a parlay is when you have 2 or more outcomes tied together as far as a sports betting perspective goes. So let's say that you're like Barnes and you like Tennessee today and they're playing Florida. There you go. And they're a 3.5-point underdog. You can either play them on the 3.5, or you can play them on the plus 140 on the money line. That's what I like to do. So my parlays were Rutgers beating UCLA outright. Or I'm sorry, Oregon State beating UCLA outright in LA. It was Rutgers beating Arkansas. And then it was Kansas State, 14.5-point underdog at Oklahoma. K-State had not won in Norman in over 40 years. They were the final leg of that parlay. And everybody's screaming from the mountaintops, you should hedge. That means I should go to the window at the sportsbook and bet Oklahoma and guarantee myself money. At that time, it was a fan bet. Obviously, K-State looked great. It was one of those games that I think really put the Wildcats on the map there, at least for a couple of seasons. And I would say that overall is my favorite thing to do, is to really find those odd-defying teams that nobody thinks has a chance. And you mentioned Florida. I had Kentucky in that parlay this year, and everybody said Kentucky never beats Florida. I'm like, you're right. I was in Lexington in 2001, I believe, when they ended up going to overtime with Florida. My friend's dad was coaching there at the time, and I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna win. And of course, they still didn't, because that's how hard it's been for the Kentucky Wildcats. But I think they're going to be kind of a force to reckon with this year in the SEC. I'm excited to see if they can really level up, if you will, from last year.
Kelly, someone asked this question. Feel free to ask her later. Where does she bet for sports? If I recall, Barnes uses Win.
Westgate. I use mostly Westgate when I'm in Vegas. Then it depends when traveling, what's available, what's both legal and what's, where I'm going to get my money back if I win. I've not been a fan of offshore sports books, because if you get into them enough, bye cash, good luck enforcing that contract. Also, now it's become less so, but in the old days, a lot of the folks that ran the offshore books were, let's just say, interesting people with old family ties. So you had to be a little careful about that world. But what are your when you're in Florida or Vegas, what are some of your favorite sports books?
Boy, did Florida drop the ball this year, by the way. I mean, 6 weeks, it was great, and then crash and burn. I only bet at the Barstool Sportsbook. That's the only place I'm allowed to bet, so that's where I bet all of my bets, barstoolsportsbook.com. That's all I got.
And in fact, do you? I mean, my understanding is if people do bet at Barstool Sports, they can get certain discounts or other deals if they're following certain bets that you propose or recommend.
Right. So we do things like odds boost. Pretty much most U.S. sportsbooks do them. So, for example, if my parlay was to pay 38-1, right? So if you bet $100, you win 3,800. They may boost me up to 40-1, and just gives you that little extra coin at the end of the day. If it does hit, now again, my parlays last year, the fact that we hit 2 back to back was pretty incredible. I'm happy hitting 1 a season. So there's, essentially 13 weeks or so of college football. So I hit 1 a year, and I'm free rolling for the rest of the season. As you mentioned, the 2 that I hit last year, I'm free rolling for about 4.5 years on these parlays now. So pretty happy because I did not hit 1 in 2020. So it was nice to really rebound and come in strong, especially, after what I went through last summer. I remember my boyfriend told me, and I said, what? And he goes, well, this golfer said this. And then he went out and won a major. And this NASCAR driver said that. And then he won the Coca-Cola 500. He goes, if you win, Kelly, people forget about all of the noise. And so I really put my head down and tried really, really hard, not only for, it sounds weird calling them fans, but I would say more of my followers on Twitter. And that's what I realized. I kind of found the secret sauce, in my opinion, on what I need to be doing week in and week out. And it's gonna be a really fun. I'm so excited. It's gonna be a really fun season.
I got a question about working with Barstool. You came in last year, so you sort of skipped over a number of the elements of the drama. Is the El Presidente Michael Rappaport fight still going on?
Every once in a while I'll see a tweet here and there. The best part about Dave is Dave gives no fucks, and that's what I love about him. When I got fired from ESPN, I obviously was not in a good place mentally for a magnitude of reasons, but I was more embarrassed and upset for my family. But then I just checked my DMs, and like 6 hours after the announcement, there's Dave Portnoy, and I'm going, what the hell? Because his big thing is fuck cancel culture. And that's what I love most about him. And I understand, did I deserve to lose my job? That's up for debate. The problem is do I deserve to lose my livelihood in my life? No. And that's one thing that I've noticed he does really, really well. He goes after some of the cyber bullies. He goes after some of the people that are really just not good people and have ill intentions for whether it's a political reason, whether it's for a click reason. I get it. You want those clicks. But Dave has been really great. I haven't seen much on the Rappaport thing. I mean, I remember being on the phone with him years ago with somebody saying something along the lines of, you guys would do a great show together. And I'm thinking, no, we wouldn't, but I'm going to hear you guys out. And to know I'm probably in good company with Dave as far as that sentiment goes is pretty funny. But he's even cooler in person. And that's a question I get all the time. How's Dave? Dave's great. What do you want me to say? I think he's great.
Let me pry and ask the question. Why did you get fired from ESPN? And what on earth did that work environment look like now that we've seen the way CNN has gone in terms of what the children call wokeness?
So I actually worked for Bleacher Report for 2 years and didn't know at the time that they were owned by Time Warner, AKA the same company that owns CNN, which is now AT&T. And I had a great time. We were kind of in a silo out in Vegas, worked at the Caesars Sportsbook. We had our own stage. Everything was fine until COVID shut us all down. And then they gave us busy work, like watching videos that don't even matter. I remember having to speak up, and I'm like, hey, excuse me, as the only woman on this team, we are actually not doing this monologue because you are failing to realize all of these things that this said person did. I'm sorry for what happened to him, but at the same time, we're not doing this. And I got some backlash on it, and I kind of didn't like it. And so my agent said, hey, listen, what are you wanting? And I said, I kind of want to go back to CBS. And he said, what do you mean? I go, I love CBS. I got to work remote. Everybody was amazing. I already have a rapport with Todd and Kenny. My boss over there was awesome. And so we started kind of that talk with CBS. And nothing really was brought up. No Barstool, no ESPN, nothing. And I'd full on been like, okay, when my contract's up, this is where I'm going back to. I was really happy there. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call from my agent. He's like, ESPN really wants you. And I said, nah, no thanks. And he's like, they have a brand new studio at the Link in Vegas. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of just want to be able to work remote. I'm one of those people. I've really enjoyed it. You can probably hear my French bulldog snoring in the background right now, but I've really enjoyed setting my own schedule, saying yes to things I want to do, and being able to say no to things I don't. And he goes, all right, what should we counter with ESPN? And I kind of threw out a pretty egregious number and said, also, I want to be remote. And they came back and said, okay. And I'm like, holy shit. I didn't actually need this to come to fruition, but it did. And so I started there. I started the paperwork process, all of that stuff. And then it leaked. I'm trying to think of who leaked it. Somebody leaked it before I made the announcement. Darren Ravel. Thank you. My brain just kind of went out for a second. Darren Ravel leaked it. And so I had to just hurry up and say, yay, I'm so excited, all these things. And it was like really, really good feedback, minus about 10% of trolls. So back to Bleacher Report, when I was there were some old tweets that had surfaced that people had screenshots of, and Bleacher Report suspended me for 30 days. Wager Talk suspended me for 30 days and said, okay, this wasn't that big of a deal. Let's move forward. And everything was fine. I kind of knew that those tweets would probably come back out again throughout my career, and that's fine. It's an unfortunate part of my history, if you will. I'm not proud of it. I don't think it was okay to say those things at the time, but they're there, and I kind of have to learn to live with it. And I had kind of passed it. Bleacher Report got over it. Wager Talk got over it, and here we are. And so during the announcement, then those tweets, the pictures of the tweets resurfaced. I got a call from my boss, said, don't worry about it. It's from 2009, 2010. We really don't care. It's going to be fine. And then June 1st was supposed to be my start date. I got a call a couple of days before saying, hey, some people that are in the office found out about your tweets, because that's what the trolls were kind of doing. They were tagging other anchors and important people at ESPN. And so it must have gotten enough attention to where it went up the ladder. And they said, hey, sorry, we're deeming this as hate speech. We're going to have to let you go. So it was kind of a really crazy, like drawn out process, because I thought I was fine. And then I kind of knew I wasn't fine. And yeah, no, I tell kids this all the time. I really do not think we should be having social media for children, because I am afraid that it's going to come back up. I mean, we've seen tons of people try to cancel for somebody saying something that was not necessarily socially acceptable, but was more widely used, similar to what I said. And now it's not. And that's the difference in 10, 12, 13 years later. And that's kind of the thing is we've seen with other people. Maybe they used a terminology that is no longer allowed or no longer acceptable. There's several words that I've taken personally out of my vernacular. The one I used in 2009, 2010 has been long gone. And that's just the unfortunate thing, is that social media lives forever. I mean, I even deleted my Facebook because people were going after my sister and doing things like that. And that sucks. But, she tried to come to my rescue, and that's never the answer.
Well, when was your first introduction to this new wave of cancel culture, where based on unapproved political viewpoints or something being outside of politically correct contemporary language, even if it's decades old now, suddenly comes back in, and people use it as a grounds to prevent someone from being employed, prevent people from even having social media access in some points. When were you first in seeing the cancel culture, from your perspective, start to come into people's livelihoods?
That's a really great question. And I'm really bad about being in my own little bubble. I really am. I don't watch a lot of news because it really either pisses me off, depresses me, or I just don't have a lot of time. My life is devoted to sports and my family and my dog. And I do think that there was a point in time where I would say it was probably after the 2016 election where we started seeing it happen. But because it didn't happen to me or within my little bubble, I just didn't think anything of it. It wasn't like, oh, that person deserves this, or, oh, that's inherently wrong to do to somebody. but I just think it was there. And I never really paid enough attention. And that kind of sucks because once it does happen to you, then you're going, wait, am I the only person this happened to? Well, of course not. It happens all day, every day. It happened, my mom worked for the federal government for a long time. And while she didn't get canceled, there was an issue in court one day where she was accused of certain things by the defendant, and that just wasn't the case. Well, further on down the road, those things got brought back up. Well, you have a history of this. And my mom's like, what? So she didn't lose her job, but those kind of weird things that we start these little spirals, they can quickly spiral out of control. And am I happy I got fired? Yeah, absolutely. Barstool Sports has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Getting to be myself is truly amazing. And I couldn't ask for a better employer. I think that it was never supposed to work out for ESPN, even though it was in that process. The culture there, I don't know much about it, but I've seen what's happened to people like Sage Steele. She went on Jay Cutler's podcast. They tried to cancel her for that. Then I think she had COVID, and there were some other reasons why she was missing. But we've seen that Maria from Monday Night Football. They basically just shoved her out the door too. While they don't say it's for certain reasons, it's happening. And I really think that the culture that I was told about Barstool, but prior to working there, oh, they're misogynistic, or oh, they're this or they're that, is so far from the truth that now that I'm immersed in it, I am absolutely just enamored with what this company does on a day-to-day basis.
We've seen ESPN become, as Clay Travis calls it, my fellow Tennessean, woke center, in the sense that, I remember when ESPN was actually just about covering sports and in a fun, creative. I remember when Keith Olbermann was actually sane.
He's the only ESPN employee that celebrated my firing. He went off on a tangent. And I'm like, dude, aren't you the guy talking about throwing 16-year-olds into a wood chipper? Please spare me about my integrity and who I am as a person. Yeah, ESPN, unless there's a game on, I'm not watching ESPN. I made a joke, obviously a joke. I told my fantasy football team I was going to quit unless they moved to CBS or Yahoo. And we did not. We're still on ESPN. But it is funny how we think as a culture that a majority of people want something one way. And I really do think as a country, we have a lot more things in common than we don't. And one of those things is sports. And I really wish that I could turn on a Sports Center and be able to watch it from an unbiased opinion. I really wish it was like a perspective of either a gambling side of things or from a former athlete standpoint. I love listening to Tony Romo on Monday Night Football because he gives me the quarterback perspective. I am a female. I never got to play college football. I got to play powder puff in high school and I was a quarterback. But now looking at it going, okay, here's the read option. This is why he's calling the audible, because they've got a spy on this linebacker coming across the middle. He sees that, and that's exactly what's happening in real time. That's the stuff I love about sports, and that's the commentary I love. I told my dad the other day, and he goes, oh, I would never watch WNBA. I go, Dad, WNBA is a absolute moneymaker. What do you mean? And WNBA is some of the best sharp information you can get. And that's because that's who bets it. So when you see that line move, whether it's a side or total, you can bet there's some major money backing it. And he goes, that's why you watch it? And I go, well, yeah, why else would I watch it? I go, the ladies are actually great defensively. They make some really fun plays. Unlike the NBA and even sometimes in college basketball, you can see the play formulate. And I miss that from male sports, particularly because it's a lot more run and gun. It's a lot faster. These ladies are a lot more methodical, and it's exciting to watch. And I told him that. I said, from a fundamental standpoint, you would love watching the WNBA, but because it's so inundated with so many messagings and things like that, and that's fine. If the ladies want to use their platform, by all means. But that, by all means people don't have to watch. And that's kind of the issue, if you will. I had a buddy text me, Matt, who actually worked with at CBS, who I believe now is at Right Side. I would double check that, but he works on Jesse Kelly's show. And he texted me, he goes, you with Barnes, like the eyeball emoji. What are you guys talking about? I go, sports betting, of course. What else would we talk about? And he said, really? I find that very hard to believe. And I said, we're going to go wherever the conversation takes us. And that is the thing. Yeah. watch some WNBA highlights. I'm telling you, the WNBA is hilariously great for there are times where the line has moved 3 points, Robert, and college football, NFL, college basketball, I would never bet it off a line move. I just, line open 4.5, it's now 7.5. Let me hurry up and bet the Chicago Sky right now. And it just, their information is so good. I can't even begin to explain it. WNBA,
Kelly,
I have had so many people be like, you're done betting.
let me ask you one thing, actually. If people want to follow you, and to get your picks, are you behind a paywall, or is this?
Oh, absolutely not. No. Barstool, I write a weekly blog during college football season and NFL, talking about my picks in a written format. I also do a video I post on Instagram as well as Twitter. Everything I do is free. And that is because I really, truly do want to educate people. And that's not necessarily on my picks. Follow me, fade me, do whatever you want. But if you can take that little tidbit that I threw in that video and you can sit next to your buddy at the bar on Saturday and you're like, hey, did you know that, Alabama is 7-1 against the spread in the first quarter, this first 8 games. So I bet Alabama -2.5 versus Auburn in this first quarter. And then they kick a late field goal and Alabama covers it by 3 and you're going to give your buddy that nudge. Like, that stuff's exciting to me. If I can keep a 21-year-old kid that just is new to betting from teasing through 0 in the NFL on Sundays, like, that's my job. My job is to make it fun, learn some things, and really share some of the knowledge, because let me tell you, I've made a lot of mistakes, whether that's tweeting, whether that's making bad bets, whether that's bad financial advice. I've done it all. I'm a plethora of bad mistakes and learning from them and sharing that with other people.
What are some of your, what they call bad beats in Vegas? Some of the worst, most undeserved sports betting losses. I remember I had one a couple of NFL seasons, a couple of seasons ago, where I actually turned the game off because it was like, 7 seconds. All I had to do was run out the clock, game over, spread covered. And then I checked my sports betting account like a couple hours later, and I somehow lost the bet. And I'm like, what the heck? I go back and look, and that was the game where they tried to do a Hail Mary, and somehow the other team got, I think it was the Redskins, no longer the Redskins, whatever their name now, the Commanders, whatever.
The commies.
I call them the ball, and they take it back, and they score a touchdown, and it screwed my entire. I was like, it was miserable. Every sports gambler remembers their bad beats better than their best bets. What are some of your worst, toughest bad beats?
The worst bad beat that comes to mind, I had NC State plus 7.5 versus North Carolina, and this would have been 7 or 8 years ago. Neither team was particularly good. I don't even think Mac was at North Carolina then. He might have been. Either way, lining up to kick the point after. There's almost no time left on the clock. Let's call it 7 or 8 seconds, like you just said. They just have to kick it up through the uprights. The game's going to land 7. I'm going to win by the half. That's all we need. Long snapper fumbles the snap, and it goes crazy. Kicker picks it up and throws it for 2. And North Carolina wins by 8. And I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? What happened in my life? And those are the good and the bad, right? Have I had anything like that happen on the flip side? I'm sure. But as I mentioned, you don't remember those. You only remember the gut-wrenching dagger to your heart going, oh, that hurt so bad. It not only hurt me so bad, it hurt my bank account so bad. That's the one that really sticks out in my mind. And that's where it kind of it's going to stay, because I'm sure, I had Eagles. I call these CLV trophies. Closing line value is something very important in our industry, and that means getting the best of the number. Sometimes getting the best of the information is better than getting the best of the number, and I argue that as well. But I had Eagles plus 3 last year versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Said, the Raiders, 3-point favorites? Are you out of your mind? Eagles closed 3-point favorites on the road, get blown out. Didn't even matter. Those are the kind of ones where I'm like, I did all this hard work, and now I have this little trophy that says, congratulations, you participated, but you still lost, even though you did your job by getting the best of the number. And that's why I kind of started joking. It was a CLV participation trophy, if you will.
Kelly, have you got any people are asking for picks? I don't even know what sports are coming up, but what picks do you have?
No, I have no idea what sports are coming up. We have 24 days before college football kicks off, and I have not bet anything week 1 yet. So I will say this. I color code everything because I'm a lunatic and I like to be very organized. So I did write down some of the bets that I did make, whether they were prop bets or futures bets so far. And I will say this, when it comes to futures bets, remember, this is August. Lots can happen between now and February Super Bowl that are completely out of your control. Somebody tears an ACL, somebody gets hurt, somebody does something stupid in an elevator. I mean, Andrew Luck literally retired a week before the first Colts game. If you had the Colts overseason win total and you're going, oh, why did you do this to me? So I always tell people, yes, getting the best of the number is very important as far as futures bets go. And sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to lay off. But it's also important to know that bad things can happen in the next 5 weeks before the NFL kicks off or 3.5 weeks before college football kicks off. So bear with me here. These are going to be all the bets that I am making and I'm very excited for, particularly starting off with Saints to win the NFC South is the one I have basically touted all over the internet. I'm a big Jameis Winston fan. I bet his over 3,700.5 passing yards on the season. I think he's going to have a really big game. Everything I'm hearing out of New Orleans is Jameis. I truly did not like Jameis when he was at Florida State. I was like, you're annoying. What are you doing? You know, there was, whether it was sexual allegations, stealing crab legs. He was a kid, right? I don't know. I've been to Tallahassee. There wasn't probably a lot else to do. That being said, he kind of won me over when he was on Hard Knocks. And I kind of started following him a little bit more. And I kind of reminded me of like Brett Favre-esque, where what are you going to get? Is he going to throw a 70-yard touchdown pass or is he going to throw a pick six? You don't know. And we started to see that shift last year, even though he did get hurt, versus what I call good Jameis and bad Jameis. And that is he did not make those errant throws like we've seen him do in the past. He has really started to lock it up. From what I hear, he's got really good control over that locker room. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Saints agree with me. Otherwise, they wouldn't have re-signed him. They drafted him a wide receiver. They drafted him offensive tackle. They are trying to build this team around him. Now, as far as Dennis Allen goes, the verdict is still out there. I do think that we're all going to miss Sean Payton as far as that in his retirement. If he's really going to stay retired, is going to be an interesting sight to see as well. But I would say that's more of the wild card that is keeping me from absolutely hammering. Most places you can get at least plus 250, if not better, on the Saints to win the NFC South. I like them over 8.5 wins for their season win total. Don't forget, they get to play Tom Brady twice. But the good news is they get to play the Falcons twice too. That is the good news for them as well. I have several other ones. Dalvin Cook, over 9.5 rushing touchdowns, minus 130 most places. I really like this Vikings team. And while Coach Zimmer was the joke, we used to joke he was the love of my life because he was one of the best against the spread coaches in the NFL. We got on the rocks the last 2 years, though. 2020 and 2021, he and I had some marital distress, and so we decided to part ways, as did the Vikings. But I think McConnell is going to keep that same core Vikings offense, and that is run game heavy. I do think Dalvin Cook is going to be one of, I would say, top 5 running back, and I plan on drafting him if he's available late in the second round. Kirk Cousins kind of coupled along with that. Look for Kirk Cousins over passing yards. I never knew how much Coach Zimmer hated Kirk Cousins. I am a big Kirk Cousins fan, and that is because he made me a ton of money at Michigan State. And yes, people never forget. Something else to consider here is going along with correlated bets, right? So if you like the Bills to win the Super Bowl, maybe that's not the best option, but maybe Josh Allen MVP is going to pay better, right? You want to kind of look for those type of bets where maybe the bookmakers know they're getting a ton of Bills money, but everybody's still going to bet Tom. Everybody's still going to bet Aaron Rodgers. Matthew Stafford's going to be on the top of that list because he just won the Super Bowl last year. And start kind of sifting through some of these prop bets in order to get prepared for football season. I did, as a homer, bet K-State over 6.5 wins. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you homer. Like, K-State's going to win 8 games this year, hopefully 9, and go to a decent bowl game. But 6.5, I have bet the K-State over season win total for like the last 5 years. And every single year, it's 5.5, 6, 6.5. It's just downright disrespectful. And every single year, I've got to cash a ticket. So I'm sticking with that one as well. Let's see what else I've got on my list. One of the guys from work, Stephen Che, is really about his data. And so I love doing shows with him. He actually has CeeDee Lamb as his leading yards receiver, plus 1,300 this year. And got me kind of looking into this Cowboys team a lot more. And while I'm supposed to hate the Cowboys, I guess, of some sort, because everybody in my age group either is a Cowboys fan or hates said Cowboys from the 90s, I do think the Cowboys are going to win the NFC East again. And that is unfortunate because the Eagles are trying to make that push. I just don't think Jalen Hurts is that guy. And I wouldn't lay that kind of juice with the Cowboys to repeat. And typically we don't see a repeat in the NFC East. Usually unless Donovan McNabb is your quarterback. It usually cycles every year. But, man, the Washington Commanders look like they're going to be in a world of hurt. I do not know what to make of this team. Ron Rivera, who is known as Riverboat Ron in the gambling world, kind of stopped gambling as much. He really used to push the envelope, and now he just kind of doesn't. And so it's interesting to see what that team's going to be. Daniel Jones, I think, hit some random fan at practice the other day with an errant pass. I see stuff like that. And then his left tackle gets hurt during practice. I think the Giants are going to be an unfortunate sight to see, but I'm not laying under 5.5 wins. I just can't do it. It's too juicy.
Speaking of a bet that's still off the board for the most part, concerns the Cleveland Browns. And I have conflicting emotions on this in the sense, or sentiments, in that aside from it'd be nice for the Browns, had some good luck for a change. But on the one hand, I'm not a big fan of the NFL getting in the image even though they're in the image business of getting to the degree of detail they are, and definitely didn't think their woke politics was a good idea. On the other hand, if they're going to be in that business, there needs to be some consistency in application. And it seems they are all over the place. I mean, how is it that a deflated football is 4 games and
weed is 25?
Deshaun Watson just is alleged to have harassed about 25 women that have actually come forward, and they're talking about 6 games. What do you think the judge recommended 6, or the arbitrator, however you want to characterize it, recommended 6 games. Apparently the NFL is seeking an indefinite suspension. One, what are your thoughts about, should the NFL be in this kind of image management business? Does that create collateral issues, so forth? And if they are going to be in the business, what should be the suspension or punishment for Deshaun Watson?
Somebody asked me this on the other day, and I said, Twitter's just not enough characters for me to comment. I will go back to my bubble analogy. I, of course, have heard about Deshaun Watson. I haven't heard any of the women's stories in particular. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yes, Deshaun Watson, absolutely guilty. What a terrible human being. And that's hard for me to say. Do I think that 25 to 30 women is absolutely insane? And I'm going to go ahead and guess that many women are not lying. To some extent, I'm going to go ahead and guess that the Texans paid some people off to keep people quiet. And that's kind of an issue within itself. You mentioned image management. I mean, the NFL has had an image problem for a long time, whether it's guys beating up their wife in an elevator, DUIs. I mean, even back, Big Ben in Tahoe, and then the woman in Georgia. And there's all of these things that happen, right? Whether an agent buries something, somebody gets paid off. It's an unfortunate thing. And I can't sit here and be a hypocrite and say, if I was 23 years old, given millions of dollars, and was told to act accordingly, that I would have done the same. Again, when I was 23, I was tweeting mean things on the internet. So that's where it gets very difficult to say. From a judgment side of things, this is only a civil trial, correct? These women are not, there's no criminal charges being brought against him. And that's where my little spidey senses go off going, okay, if he really did these things, why isn't he going to jail? Screw the NFL. Who cares about his quarterback career? If these things are real and they're not just accusations, why haven't actual criminal charges been brought against him? And the fact that they haven't tells me we're missing something. And that's what I don't understand. And that's why I have really not commented very much on it. Of course, if even one of these allegations is real, do I think that he should be suspended more than 6 games? Absolutely. As you mentioned, Tom Brady got suspended 4 games for deflating a football. And Calvin Ridley got suspended a whole year for a $1,500 parlay. Was that stupid? Yes, Calvin, tell your buddy to go bet the game for you. Don't do it yourself. I know that seems very easy to say in hindsight, but that's just kind of the reality with the NFL. And Goodell's kind of in this rock and a hard place. Either he pushes for it and pisses off one side, or he doesn't push for it and he pisses off the other. And it sucks because, as I mentioned, we're very polarized right now in this country, and it upsets me every single day because I have friends on all sides of the aisle. And frankly, Barnes, you and I could argue about every single topic. I mean, that's what you do for a living. You're a lawyer. And so, of course, you could argue different things. And that's where it's really hard. And I wish that sports was a little bit more black and white, and that we could either just hate this team or hate that team and not bring all of this other stuff into it. But That's the world we live in. As I mentioned, we look at some of the things that happened with the Raiders team last year. And while I didn't think Gruden deserved to be fired, did I approve of his emails? No. Did I think that, we needed to have defensive players waving a gun drunkenly on Snapchat or driving at 150 miles an hour down a side street in Las Vegas? Of course not. But they are human beings as well, and they are going to make mistakes. The question is, again, those other allegations can either be brought to criminal trial or not. One of them was, one of them wasn't. The Raiders got rid of all three.
Kelly, I think you said it, but where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Kelly in Vegas, Instagram, Kelly in Vegas. I'm all over the Wager Talk YouTube channel. You can find me Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays on Money Shots with Megan Making Money. And really, I'm just going to say yes to a lot of things this year during football season. Like I said, I like saying yes. I love meeting new audiences. And that's why when Barnes was like, hey, do you want to come on? I'm like, absolutely. Love the show. I know my mom's probably watching right now in complete and utter embarrassment for me telling too many stories.
Well,
Kelly, yeah, I met her at the Great Thanksgiving that I got invited to at Kelly's
my super
place.
spreader birthday party. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yes. Exactly. That was great. That was fun. And I think one sort of last question. What do you think? What is your sort of favorite experience with? Why do you enjoy sports betting the way you do, and why do you enjoy the career that you've chosen and pursued?
So when you get to do something that you love for work, it's not really work. I've always been of the old adage, work smarter, not harder. I'm not a manual labor kind of girl. My dad, I watched him work his ass off for so many years, and then he hobbles around and his shoulder hurts and his hip hurts and all these things. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I don't necessarily want to sit at a desk all day either, but to be able to have that freedom to work for yourself. I mean, I know I work for Barstool Sports and I know I work for Wager Talk, but essentially I make my own schedule. For example, today I was color coding my football schedule to remind myself of when I was going to have some free time to be able to do some things that are not in my normal show schedule. And that is what's truly special about what I get to do. I get to work for myself and follow a passion. And the reason why I think I'm so passionate about it is because it adds another element to sports. I know it sounds arrogant, but I think a lot of sports bettors want to prove that they're right. You're a lawyer. You want to argue that your side is right. I wasn't smart enough to be a lawyer. I didn't take the LSAT. We talked about it, and I said, no, I don't want to be a lawyer. What am I going to do being a lawyer? I'm going to drop an F-bomb in front of the judge and get booted day one. And that's what's really incredible about sports betting. I still get to work on really hard on getting to be right. I get to work really hard and challenge myself every single week to sift through all of the noise, right? You listen to these talking heads, whether it's any sports channel, whether it's the news, whether it's anything, and you still get to take what you want from it and formulate your own opinion. And I think that that's what's really exciting about where we're headed. Hopefully soon enough, we're going to have all 50 states on board, or at least like 47. I mean, if Kansas can get it done, you guys, any state can get it done. I mean, Kansas is just a little wacky, but they're able to get it done. They won't even they're not going to let people smoke marijuana. You're still going to get 25 years for marijuana, but you can bet on sports now in the state of Kansas. And that's really exciting stuff to see new people getting into the space, to see other women really starting to excel. As I mentioned, some of those other women earlier, I am like such a cheerleader for the ladies that work hard and are proving that they deserve a seat at the table. Because when I started in this, there was just a bunch of old fat white guys with their fedoras smoking cigars. No, just kidding. That's just more of a joke, because that is what people used to think bookies and sports bettors look like. That's not true. Everybody, I mean, I have been approached by so many women being like, I got into sports betting because of you. This is so fun. I love now watching the games with my husband on Sunday because I've got my $5 parlay with every game on the board. And it gives you entertainment and it gives you something to cheer for. I mean, I totally joke all the time. Did I buy the 50-50 tickets? I'm never going to win I did win one. It was a really small pool, but the 50-50, but it makes it exciting. Like, okay, your team's getting blown out, but I can't leave in the third period of the Lightning game or the Knights game because I got to see if my 50-50 number won. It's just as bad as a lottery. But I was last week spinning that $1 billion in my brain. I was like, okay, if I win this lottery, what am I going to do?
Kelly, ordinarily, we would all end this together and then we would talk backstage. But there's something in the Alex Jones trial, Robert, that I think if we don't address it, people might throw a conniption fit. Kelly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I got a few more minutes.
Okay, Kelly, first of all, thank you very much. I'm still not getting into sports gambling, but I'm going to track you to see if your picks would have made me money in retrospect, and then I'll kick myself for not having done it, but I won't.
Good idea. I love that.
I'm not into gambling. I don't like it. I can see it being addictive when it goes well and then soul crushing when it goes bad. Nonetheless, fascinating. Email me the links and I'll put them in the pinned comment of this sidebar afterwards, and we'll be in touch. But this has been enlightening. I might get into sports, especially now that I'm going to be in Florida for the next little while.
I love it.
But Kelly, thank you very much for being here. It was quite interesting. I'm absorbing as we talk.
Thank you
Kelly,
both, Robert. I'll see you in Vegas here shortly.
Will do.
And Frey, if you're in Florida, we got to grab dinner.
I have your email. Email me and we'll definitely be in touch. Although, yeah, I know what the chat's going to say. I'm a married man. We'll go out with our family.
Yes. Well, it'll be a double date. It'll be
You'll
great.
get to meet Brett, who manages to be quieter than I am in social settings. It's fascinating. I was watching the March Madness party. I was wondering, I wonder how he's fixing everything, making sure the TVs work and everything works. This is Kelly's boyfriend. And I was like, I wonder how long he can go without talking. And he went
the answer is a really long time because he
it was
doesn't
like
get
8
very
minutes.
many
Like
words
that
in
is
with
impressive. That is impressive because I'm talkative on here, but generally not at social gatherings. But I was like, that's Brett beats me. That's an impressive record. But I'll be seeing him soon to do the proxies. That's for those folks out there. You can go and place. Let someone else place your picks throughout the year for a certain different competitions the Circa and other Westgate have for who's going to be the best picker, and you win a certain amount of money you put in the pool.
Millions of dollars. It's absolutely incredible. I tell people this actually, and I'm not supposed to promote any other casinos or any other sportsbooks, but I will tell you this. My buddy just accidentally got his wife pregnant with baby number 4, and he texted me and he goes, she told me I can't bet sports this year. What am I going to do? I said, convince her to let you enter the $500 or $1,000 contest, and you got a chance to win $1 million. She can't say no to that, but you have to agree to not bet throughout the year because now money's tight. And he said, that's a great idea. I mean, who doesn't want to put $1,000 in for a chance to win over $1 million? It's a really exciting contest. I particularly like the Survivor one just because it is absolutely excruciating to watch the Bills lose to the Jags or to the Lions last year that tied the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I was there in person for Marco's birthday. And I'm like, this is not real life. But Big Ben got COVID Friday as we were pulling into town. And I'm like, rest in peace to our Survivor pick of the Steelers that were a 9-point favorite. Now they're a 2.5-point favorite.
Chad is taking issue with the accidentally. So setting that aside. And Kelly, it's just a channel joke where I always say, the key to a happy life is to, my battery's going to go dead. Holy crab apples. Kelly?
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. But hold on. Why is that's why it's not plugged in. I feel like Marty McFly or Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
You just disappear.
Okay, there we go.
Computer dies. It's just me and Barnes. We just keep talking about sports gambling. We can talk about it for hours. Barnes, hopefully I'll see you while I'm in Vegas, and we'll go recreate a dinner at Barry's.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Kelly.
Thank you, guys.
All right, bye-bye. Robert. Okay, now I'm going to be kicking myself forever for making the joke with someone who might not get the inside joke of the channel about, the schmeckles in your pants. Robert, just a few minutes. I'll go live and do the update on the Alex Jones tomorrow. And I didn't want to do this with Kelly because I don't think we would mix the Alex Jones controversy with Kelly. What the hell happened today, Robert? We've got to talk about this. The revelation that everyone's talking about, not your indirect appearance in court. The fact that the counsel says to Alex Jones that they accidentally received his cell phone with the last 2 years of text messages and emails and whatever, accidentally from Jones's own attorneys. They notified Jones's attorneys, and then apparently after 10 days, they determined that privilege has been waived and they can do what they want with this info. Are you at liberty to discuss how any of this can possibly happen?
I mean, I don't know anything about it beyond what people have reported took place in court. What I commented on is that the attorney-client privilege is not waivable by the attorney. So there's a statute in Texas called a clawback provision that allows any attorney to claw back anything within 10 days if it was accidentally or incidentally disclosed. But if an attorney accidentally discloses privileged information, that is not considered a waiver of the attorney-client privilege. And the plaintiff's lawyer's mistake was to acknowledge two things. First, that the plaintiff's lawyer knew this was turned over accidentally, not intentionally. And for those out there, the ethical rules have been very clear on this for a very long time. This happens every day in America. A lawyer will accidentally disclose something because they get the wrong email address sometimes or something else, or they'll put in the wrong file and something gets sent that the other side is not supposed to have. Your obligation, if you receive something that you know or have reason to know the other side did not intend to send you, is to send that information back immediately and not keep any copies, not look at it, definitely not use it. Mark Bankston, the lawyer apparently for the plaintiffs, admitted he knew he had received information that was not intentionally to be given to him, that manifestly by his description most likely includes privileged information, and knew that Jones had not deliberately done so and that was uninformed and unaware of it. And despite that, read it, reviewed it, and used it in court and said he was going to send it to other people. This is illegally obtained information in violation of the law. An attorney cannot waive attorney-client privilege, and what Mark Bankston admitted was highly unprofessional, unethical conduct. That's my view of it. And the privilege is owned by the client. Only the client can waive it. So just because there's a Texas rule that gives you an automatic supplemental remedy of clawback doesn't change the fact that only a client owns the attorney-client privilege and that only a client can disclose things that are in breach of the attorney-client privilege. So what you have is just flagrant violation of the ethical rules by the plaintiff's lawyers with no punishment by the court. And by the way, that happened. We'll talk about it more on Sunday. There were violations all week in the trial that finally closed today with closing arguments. To give an example, they took quotes of mine out of context and played them as if they were statements of Alex Jones when they're not. To give a basic explanation, the judge had a total misunderstanding or just deliberately misinterpreted the rules, whichever it may be, in that a statement of a third party an out-of-court statement by a witness is only a party opponent admission if that person is a corporate officer who can impute liability to the company. Just because InfoWars broadcast somebody's comments does not make those comments free speech systems liable comments. It never has been that way. That is why Nicholas Sandman's case was entirely dismissed by a federal judge who said none of the newspapers or television stations could be responsible for reporting what a third party said. So merely having a third party statement broadcast on those on air does not make it a corporate statement or party opponent admission. That is a patently ridiculous and directly contrary to the rules of evidence. And the judge either is too incompetent to know that, or the judge is just a fraud and is lying about what the rules are. But that gives an example. I don't know if there was it made sense that this case would culminate in false allegations of perjury. Like they made a big deal. Alex Jones had some sort of email address. I've dealt with him for many years. I've never known him to read, receive, or send an email ever. So the idea that there's some email address that someone else is apparently using that he may have access to, that he's not an email guy. He just isn't. When he testified, he doesn't send emails and doesn't use it. He means it. Trust me. Personal experience, that is absolute God's truth. So all these claims of perjury are nonsense. That they're more fake claims for the fake narrative that they have. In fact, they were mad because I said that the case was scripted for a future audience. It is. There's no other way to describe what they've done than when they only allow one side of evidence to come in, when they have 3 movie cameras there filming the entire case, when they allow evidence that should never be allowed in, they won't allow evidence that should absolutely be allowed in, allow a one-sided story to be presented, violate every rule known to man, and all the rest of it. It is in fact a scripted case.
Sorry, but the other thing is, Robert, the lawyers, plaintiffs' lawyers, knew that they had this for 12 days and then presumably never mentioned it to anybody in those 12 days and wait for the last day of the trial to fling it on everybody.
It's just
one
one
issue that I had,
violation after another. I mean, it's extraordinary.
but the one issue I had is, okay, so they have the last 2 years of Alex Jones's phone. I'm not trying to defend him. If there's issues, if there's documents that he did not turn over on that phone, okay, that's going to be an issue, and there should be appropriate sanctions.
What issue? He's already been defaulted. So they've already got the maximum remedy. I mean that's what doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't know why anything was turned over, but they already got the maximum remedy. So they're going to say, are they going to default him a second time? It's like Al-Zahari that they keep killing him over and over and over again.
No, but it's one step beyond that, because they're saying we have the last 2 years. His default judgment was November of 2021. So there's potentially 9 months. 9 months of correspondence, which could have nothing to do with the default because he had already defaulted. Now, in theory,
but it can't relate to the merits of the case because he's already been defaulted, right? So it's not like, oh, well, if we had this discovery, it would have been critical. How? You've already been defaulted him. You've already denied him a defense. I mean, that's what was ludicrous. He was being deposed after they had defaulted him. It's like, based on what? Based on what? I mean, this was supposed to be there was no legal grounds to continue to depose him. There just wasn't. You'd already said he can't defend himself. Well, if he can't defend himself, then there's no relevance to any discovery, period, moving forward. There's no right to any discovery moving forward because that's it. End of story. So that's what makes no sense about all of this and shows what a complete mockery it was. And by the way, if there was anything actually impactful in what they turned over, they would have used it today in court.
100%.
Instead, all they brought up was stuff people sent him. I was like, that has no bearing on anything.
But also, why are they allowed to seek damages without showing financial loss? Well, because they said so at the beginning.
It's because they've changed all the rules. I mean, their theory is emotional damages. As far as I can tell, that's it. I haven't seen any evidence or discussion of evidence of reputational damage that's been calculated to an economic degree. To my knowledge, no economic expert even testified as to that. So it's all emotional damages, and and by the way, they appear to have contradicted themselves. Because originally they were allowed to reinstate punitive damages claims based on what now appears to be fake information from the plaintiff's lawyers that their clients had not seen or heard or knew to sue Jones until very late in the process. My understanding is they testified very differently. They testified that they had access to that information much earlier on. Well, that means that the Court of Appeals made a decision based on a lie by the plaintiff's lawyers. So, I mean, everything about this case has been a joke. Just a complete and utter. By the way, why is evidence coming in about what Alex Jones thinks about the case, the judge or the jury? That I've never seen that introduced ever in a trial. That has no bearing whatsoever on the trial. It's solely meant to prejudice the jury. That's it. That's pat. I challenge anybody, go find a single court case where they said that was admissible. I mean, every rule was violated. Every right was vitiated. Every principle about a neutral, impartial proceeding was completely absconded from. It was a joke of justice that people should be embarrassed about happening in America, period. Whatever you think about Alex Jones, the proceedings were a crock, and they're an embarrassment to the rule of law in America, period.
And just so that I understand, the 10 days to which plaintiffs' attorneys were referring, that's if, set aside privilege, that's if a lawyer accidentally sends something that's not privileged, they get notified. If they don't retract their accidental communication, it's deemed to be accepted. That's what I understand.
Loosely, it is a supplemental remedy that says by law, no waiver could apply unless they've been afforded a 10-day time period to claw back, is what it's called, clawback statute. It is not the exclusive remedy, nor is it the only means that's defined a waiver. Typically what happens is that it is assumed that the client waived it by their authorized agent turning it over without complaint, even upon notice. But the plaintiff's lawyer took that issue out of the bag when he said, when he said it was by mistake, number one. And number two, I'm sure you, Mr. Jones, didn't know it. That means you knew you had information that was likely privileged information that you were not legally entitled to, that you read, reviewed, and used in violation of core ethical rules. But this is who the left celebrates. These kind of ethics violating lawyers and judges who make a joke out of law.
But Robert, they're going to say that if it does prove that Alex Jones lied about not having information that he said he couldn't communicate when he said it, when he was found in default, then the ends justify the means.
It has no bearing, though. It has no bearing. I mean, they've already defaulted him on the myth of that. So
True,
it's like,
true,
what
but
else
some-
you do?
some people-
I default him a second time. I default him a third
No, but some
time.
people are going to say the default is therefore justified because it shows that when he was defaulted
It
in
couldn't be
November,
because it's an after the fact phenomenon. So it can't be used to justify something they did 6 months ago or 9 months ago. That's why it has none of the bearing that they want to use. By the way, they're still wrong because what they were trying to say was false was some text he received that referenced something else being like Sandy Hook. That's not a Sandy Hook text he sent, number one. Number two, the other thing they're saying was somehow wrong was that there are emails that are accessible on his phone. Not that he ever used the email, not that he ever sent email. And I know from personal experience the man doesn't. So the claims that there was anything in there as perjury are just nonsense. It's just made up claims. It's attempts to inflame the jury, attempts for this show trial. I mean, as one comment, I think it was Dr. Benjamin, I forget the last name, put it, he goes, this is even worse than a Soviet show trial because at least Soviet show trials tried to look like they were fair. This doesn't even try that. So we've seen an evisceration of pretty much every right and remedy you have available to you in a single trial, and it's a circus. It's a circus. That's what the trial is, and it's a circus because of the judge and the plaintiff's lawyers. That's what it is. I mean, when Jones was talking to the two plaintiffs after the end of court proceedings the other day, the plaintiff's lawyer, jumps in and starts screaming and drags them away. I've never seen that occur before. So, I mean, this is the kind of mindset and then it's misportrayed in the press what took place, and they can get away with that. Why? Because the court has prohibited people from broadcasting what took place unless you're a approved member. So, I mean, all of this is insanity. Everything about this is the question isn't whether there's reversible error. It's which reversible error do you count? Now, the only question is, will the Texas Austin Court of Appeals care, or will they rubber stamp this railroading? And then will the Texas Supreme Court step up to the plate or continue to hide like they did before the case started?
People had pointed out that the Texas Court of Appeal had ratified or approved of the default verdict.
Not really. Not really. And that's not my understanding. What it is a default judgment is generally not reviewable until there's a final monetary judgment. Okay. And so you can try an interlocutory appeal, but they don't have to take it. So to my knowledge, there's been no Texas Court of Appeals decision affirming the defaults that took place here.
They're in deliberation now on the quantum, and they're going to ascribe a quantum. I was listening to the instructions. I mean, good luck if the jury can understand those instructions, because I couldn't. It's don't double attribute damages for different headers. Bottom line, they're going to throw out a number. We're going to see if it's going to be nominal or if it's going to be appropriate for what might be the objective wrongs, or whether or not it's going to be disproportionate for the purposes of sinking InfoWars.
Well, see, I mean, it would be a mini miracle if the jury can come back with an impartial verdict. Even if they were the best jury in the world, they've just been through a complete circus where the court has made clear what she wants to have happen. And very few jurors have the courage or wherewithal to stand up to this kind of circus trial. Generally, show trials get the result that they want. That's why they're called show trials. So that because... And what do I mean by scripted? I mean that only a certain side of the story is being allowed to be told. That's what I mean.
Robert, like it was quite funny, first of all, to see you on the video when they say to Alex, you and InfoWars said that this is scripted. And I was like, oh, you and not to play semantics, but Alex Jones said, I don't think that. I think blah, blah. It's like, well, was this not on InfoWars? And then you come up, which was funny enough. With the Instahard banner above your head, which was
they play 5 seconds because they don't want they don't want the jury to hear what I actually said. They play 5 seconds out of context because they can't play the honest, full truth. And once again, what does the judge do? Judge allows that in. It's not a party admission. I'm not an agent of InfoWars or anything else, and it's so it's not admissible under those rules. She was completely wrong about that. It's not a statement of free speech system. She just totally either she's an idiot or a liar, and then and then they don't play the context, which is what happened which by the plaintiff's lawyer's own definition was altered video. So when you have a complete crock of a trial, then you tend to get ridiculous verdicts, and I think that's where this case may end up. But everything about this case was a disgrace. What I predicted would happen is what happened.
And she says, the lawyer says, you literally think this is scripted, as the judge literally says, this is what you can and cannot say. This is not how you have to answer the question, but effectively,
Well,
this
she
is
actually told him
this
the day
is-
before that. I mean, the way my interpretation is, oh, I understand you believe it's true, but you're only allowed to give my truth. You know,
Yeah,
that's
she said it.
that's
She said it. You may believe it, but it's not the truth. You may believe it, but it's
and you're
not
only
the truth.
allowed to
As
say
she tells
the
him,
truth, and that means her version of the truth.
you can't assert that you're innocent. You can't assert that you think you complied with discovery. You can't assert that you didn't intend to cause emotional distress. And somehow the judge is going to fault Alex Jones, or you're not a spokesperson. You were doing a bit on the show that it's scripted. It's not scripted, but it's quite clearly being it's within the realm of
It's a
being
different way of
scripted.
scripting. You don't have to like literally write out the entire thing for it to be a script. It's when you control the narrative in such a way, you only allow certain evidence in, you don't allow other evidence in, and that evidence doesn't conform to the rules of evidence, it doesn't conform to the rule of law, then what you are doing is scripting a trial. And in this case, why they're scripting it for the movie makers, those three little movie cameras that are in there, so that they get to retell a one-sided version of the story without being sued for libel, because they're just reproducing the actual court theater that we witnessed over the past 10 days.
So it's not scripted. Some people are just being told what they cannot say. Not scripted, though. Not scripted at all. Okay, Robert. And so they're going to deliberate. We'll see what happens. I hate to ask the question. And maybe I shouldn't even. Alex, is he going to go after his lawyers, or is this at this point?
Oh, I mean, none of that is irrelevant, I think. So I don't think it mattered in the way they tried to suggest that it mattered. In terms of even if his lawyers made mistakes in turning over information there at the end, I didn't see anything that was consequential. I don't think that's going to be the impact of the jury verdict. It's everything else that's been crazy that's led up to this.
I haven't listened to all of it, and my goodness, did I miss? I missed the drama today, but I saw the clips and the highlights, and I'll go watch Law and Crime. They're allowed to rebroadcast. People on the internet want me to do their homework for them. You are not allowed rebroadcasting the trial unless you have been expressly authorized by the judge. That means only Law and Crime and that documentary film crew in there, which is why even Law and Crime, they snip it and they clip it. They show big sections, sometimes an hour and a half, and then they show 9-minute segments, but they do not maintain the intact full stream on their channel. And the judge takes it down and deletes it at the end of the day. And people are like, oh, show me where in the trial the judge said that. For goodness sake, I'm not your babysitter. I can't do your homework for you all the time, people. It's there. It's objective. It's a foregone conclusion. It's been said every day. Nobody can rebroadcast this without the express authorization of the court. And it's fitting because now you get Law and Crime snipping and clipping certain highlights which go viral. Is there any possibility the jury recognizes the corruption, sets things straight, and award of? Okay, they do get to choose the dollar amount, right? That would be the ultimate backfire. But Robert, I know you've said it 50 times. Just one more time. The appeals process for this, if it's a massive judgment, the problem is that Jones is going to have to post the quantum, a percentage of it.
You have to
post
post
bond.
a bond, depending, and they can waive that in certain cases. The biggest hurdle is there's immediate collection of judgments without the posting of bond in the state of Texas, so that you can be right and the whole case set aside, but you can have your money and assets seized in the interim. And then the second problem is the Texas Court of Appeals. They have too many Texas Court of Appeals, in my opinion, but Austin basically has its own Court of Appeals. It's almost all liberal Democratic judges who've been the ones eviscerating Jones's rights to date when any issue has gone up on appeal. They made up new doctrines on a wide range of topics, particularly the constitutional requirement of colloquium, the intentional. And by the way, here's one thing. They're saying, well, what about the videos that weren't produced? Well, he never stored videos in that particular way, didn't index them. They used YouTube for it. YouTube just took them all down and eliminated them. But here's a question for people out there that are highlighting that point. How can you sue for defamation about a video you never heard or saw? How can you sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress if you never heard the statements, right? There's no statement that they haven't had produced the evidence of that they've actually sued over. So it's like, what exactly are they looking for? Looking for more evidence of claims they don't have for things they didn't hear, for things they didn't see, by their own admission to suggest such things even exist when they don't. So it's just one more example. It's all nuts and crazy and loony and been a sad disgrace of a trial. Sad, if they had confidence in the facts, they wouldn't have engaged in all these shenanigans. The fact that they did tells you that they themselves know the truth they're trying to script isn't the truth at all. But but the problem is getting a court to do remedy in the interim. In the Westboro Baptist case, it took the U.S. Supreme Court to finally fix the case. That was another ludicrous verdict, 77 or something $1 million, utterly unjustified, trying to basically ban an idea. Supreme Court said you can't do it, but we're here again. So it'll probably take years to get any resemblance of justice. And their goal is to crush Alex Jones in the process and use it as a template to crush others that they don't like. They made clear their goal is to shut down people whose information they don't agree with.
People are going to now fault you, Robert. Why are you so friendly with the Westboro Baptist Church? Why are you defending them, Robert? It's like people can't distinguish or separate the idea that you could even dislike someone and still defend their right, because when you're defending the right of someone you dislike, you're not defending them. You're actually in advance defending your own right and that of the people you do like.
Yes.
So
no doubt.
How long? How long do you think they're going to deliberate for? One last one.
Oh, no idea.
Verdict.
No idea.
Okay. All right, Robert, go. Everyone in the chat, I'll be live tomorrow at some point, so stay tuned. Robert, have a good one.
See you later.
How do I